What happens when an advanced alien empire encounters humanity's most isolated frontier station? What they discover will fundamentally change their understanding of what it means to be human. This is not just another story about superior firepower or advanced technology. This is about the one thing that separates humanity from every other species in the galaxy. Something so simple, yet so profound, that it has never been witnessed before in the cosmos. When the Zephyrian hegemony's most elite strike force descends upon Research Station Echo 7, they expect to find another primitive species cowering in the darkness of space. Instead, they uncover a truth that will shake the very foundations of their thousand-year empire. What makes humans truly dangerous isn't their weapons, their ships, or their technology. It's something far more terrifying, something that turns ordinary people into legends and transforms the impossible into inevitable. Prepare yourself for a story that will show you why humanity doesn't just survive in the galaxy's darkest corners. They thrive there. Commander Thiaxthan of the Zephyrian Third Fleet stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, the Dominion's Edge, watching the distant speck of metal that represented humanity's research station Echo 7. The station hung in the void like a forgotten toy, orbiting a dead moon in the Kepler 442 system, 14 light-years from Earth. According to their intelligence reports, it housed fewer than 200 humans conducting scientific research on exotic matter and dark energy applications. Insignificant, he muttered in his native tongue, his four eyes tracking the slow rotation of a human structure. The Zephyrian hegemony had conquered 47 star systems over the past millennium, absorbing or destroying dozens of species. Humans were simply the latest addition to their ever-expanding empire. Commander, his tactical officer, Subcommander Velnara, approached with measured steps. Her scaled hide gleamed under the bridge's blue lighting, and her voice carried the confidence typical of the Zephyrian military elite. Long-range scans confirm minimal defensive capabilities. The station possesses only basic shield generators and what appears to be obsolete kinetic projectile systems. No energy weapons detected. ZYX Than's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. Kinetic projectiles? These humans still throw rocks at their enemies. He turned from the viewer, his imposing 8-foot frame casting shadows across the bridge crew. How delightfully primitive. Begin the assault protocol. I want this over quickly so we can proceed to the real prize. The real prize was Earth itself, of course. The hegemony's War Council had deemed humanity's home world suitable for colonization after the natives were properly subdued or eliminated. This remote research station was merely an appetizer, a chance to study human defensive capabilities before the main course. As the fleet moved into attack formation, ZYX then reflected on the intelligence they had gathered about this particular species. Humans were young, having only achieved interstellar travel within the last century. They were fragile, dying after a mere 70 to 90 solar cycles. They lacked the natural armor of the Corvani, the telepathic abilities of the Mystari, or the technological prowess that had taken the Zephyrians 1,000 years to develop. By every metric that mattered in galactic politics, humans were inconsequential. Yet something nagged at the edges of his consciousness as he watched his ships assume their positions. The hegemony's conquest of the Rigel colonies had been straightforward. The Rigelians had surrendered after a single demonstration of superior firepower. The Centauri Confederation had fallen within 6 months, their organized military no match for Zephyrian tactical superiority. Even the warlike Drachmary had eventually submitted after their fleet was systematically dismantled. But the preliminary skirmishes with human vessels had been unusual. Human ships were indeed inferior, their weapons less powerful, their shields weaker. Yet they had inflicted far more damage than their technological disadvantage should have allowed. Human commanders made tactical decisions that bordered on the insane, ramming maneuvers, last-stand defensive positions, sacrificial attacks that served no logical strategic purpose. The hegemony had still won every engagement, but the cost had been higher than anticipated. Sir, Velnara's voice broke through his musings. We're receiving a transmission from the station. On screen, the viewer shifted to display a human female, approximately middle-aged by their standards. She sat behind what appeared to be a command console, her expression calm despite the 12 Zephyrian warships now surrounding her station. Her hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes held a quality that ZYX then couldn't quite identify. Not fear, certainly. Perhaps resignation? No, that wasn't it either. This is Dr. Sarah Chun, Director of Research Station Echo 7, the human said, her voice steady and clear. I assume you're here to demand our surrender. ZYX then leaned forward slightly. Most species began their capitulation speeches with pleas for mercy or offers of tribute. This human seemed almost businesslike. I am Commander ZYX Than of the Zephyrian 3rd Fleet. Your station and all personnel aboard are now under the authority of the hegemony. Prepare for boarding procedures and submit to immediate occupation. Dr. Chin nodded slowly, as if she had expected this exact conversation. I understand. Before we proceed, might I ask you a question, Commander? The audacity caught him off guard. You are hardly in a position to make requests, human. I'm not making a request. I'm offering information that might be valuable to you. Her fingers moved across her console, and the screen split to show what appeared to be research data. Are you familiar with the concept of quantum entanglement as it applies to consciousness? Velnara hissed in irritation. Commander, this is clearly a delay tactic. We should simply destroy their communications and proceed with boarding. But ZYX then found himself curious despite his better judgment. The hegemony's own scientists had struggled with consciousness-related quantum mechanics for decades. If these primitive humans had made discoveries in that field. Explain. Quickly. 3 years ago, we made a breakthrough in understanding how sentient minds interact with quantum fields at the subatomic level. Dr. Chin continued, her tone taking on the quality of a university lecturer. We discovered that consciousness doesn't just observe quantum states. It actually influences them. Not in any mystical sense, mind you, but through measurable, repeatable quantum mechanical processes. She paused, studying his face through the screen. Tell me, Commander, in your species' expansion across the galaxy, have you ever encountered a situation where inferior technology somehow performed beyond its theoretical limitations? The question struck closer to home than ZYX then cared to admit. Continue. We call it quantum consciousness resonance. When sentient beings are placed under extreme stress, particularly life-threatening situations, their consciousness begins to resonate with quantum fields in ways that can influence probability matrices on a macro scale. Dr. Chin's expression had grown more intense, more focused. In simple terms, Commander, desperate people can literally alter the odds. Pseudoscience, Velnara muttered, but she had moved closer to listen. Perhaps, Dr. Chin acknowledged. Or perhaps it explains why human forces have consistently inflicted more damage on your ships than your tactical computers predicted. Why our supposedly inferior weapons sometimes punch through shields that should have stopped them. Why our escape pods manage to find rescue when a mathematical probability suggests they should drift in space forever. ZYX then's 4 eyes narrowed. You're suggesting that your species possesses some form of supernatural ability? Nothing supernatural about it. Quantum mechanics is as natural as gravity. Dr. Chin leaned back in her chair, and for the first time, she smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. But here's the truly fascinating part of our research, Commander. We've learned to amplify the effect. The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of ship systems. ZYX then felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Amplify it how? Quantum consciousness resonance is strongest when triggered by 2 specific conditions: imminent death and the presence of others depending on you for their survival. Dr. Chin's fingers moved across her console again, and now the screen showed what appeared to be technical schematics. So we designed our research stations, our ships, our entire infrastructure around maximizing those conditions when threatened. The schematic showed Research Station Echo 7's internal layout, but something was wrong with the scale. The station appeared to have far more interior space than its external dimensions should have allowed. Impossible, vulnérabilité. The geometry doesn't match the external scans. Quantum expanded internal space. Dr. Chun explained matter-of-factly. We don't just research exotic matter and dark energy here, Commander. We use them. The station's interior exists in a controlled pocket of space-time that's roughly 4 times larger than the external shell suggests. And every single person aboard this station knows that if we're boarded, if we're captured, if we fail to protect our research, then humanity's survival in this galaxy becomes significantly more difficult. She stood up from her console, and the camera followed her movement. Behind her, HFY then could now see other humans moving about what appeared to be a much larger command center than should have been possible. 193 people, Commander. Each one convinced that their personal sacrifice might make the difference between humanity's survival and extinction. Each one prepared to die to prevent our research from falling into hostile hands. Each one whose consciousness is now resonating with quantum probability fields in ways that your science probably can't even detect, let alone counter. The tactical display behind Velnara began showing energy readings from the station that made no sense. Power outputs were fluctuating wildly, but not in patterns that suggested system failures. Instead, they seemed almost organic, like a heartbeat. "What have you done?" HFY then demanded. "We've done what humans always do when faced with impossible odds, Commander. We've changed the definition of impossible." Dr. Chun moved to another console, her hands dancing over controls that seemed to respond to her touch before she even made contact. You see, when nearly 200 desperate humans focus their consciousness on the single goal of protecting something precious, reality itself becomes flexible. The lights on the bridge dimmed momentarily as sensor readings from the station began climbing beyond the instrument's ability to measure accurately. Whatever was happening aboard Echo 7, it was generating energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible with any known technology. "Sir," the weapons officer called out, his voice tight with barely controlled alarm. "Our targeting systems are experiencing severe anomalies. Lock-on accuracy has dropped to 12% and falling. Navigation reports similar issues." Another crew member added. "Our positional readings relative to the station keep shifting by small amounts, but the station isn't moving." HFY then stared at the screen where Dr. Chen watched him with those unsettling eyes. "You're bluffing. Consciousness cannot alter physical reality to any measurable degree. Can't it?" She gestured to someone off-screen, and the view expanded to show the station's central research lab. What HFY then saw there defied every principle of physics he understood. Exotic matter was contained in impossible geometric forms. Dark energy flowed in visible streams that formed complex patterns in the air, and in the center of it all stood a device that seemed to fold space around itself like origami. Human researchers moved around this equipment with casual familiarity, as if reality-bending physics were as common as breathing. 3 years of research, Commander. 3 years of learning to weaponize human desperation and determination. 3 years of discovering that when you push consciousness to its absolute limits, the universe pushes back. Dr. Chan returned to her command chair, but now her movements seemed to leave brief afterimages in the air, as if space itself was having trouble processing her location. "Would you like to know what we've learned about the quantum nature of survival instincts? All ships, open fire immediately," HFY then shouted, abandoning all pretense of civilized conquest. 12 Zephyrian warships unleashed their primary weapons simultaneously. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and quantum disruptors converged on Research Station Echo 7 with enough combined firepower to atomize a small moon. The weapon struck something, but it wasn't the station. Instead, the combined energy discharge hit what appeared to be empty space, roughly 1,000 kilometers away from Echo 7, creating a brilliant explosion that briefly outshone the system's distant star. When the glare faded, the research station hung exactly where it had been, completely undamaged. Fascinating, Dr. Chen observed calmly. It seems our predictions were correct. When faced with extinction, human consciousness doesn't just observe quantum uncertainty. It actively selects which uncertainty becomes reality. The tactical display showed something that sent ice through ZYX-Thin's veins. Their weapons had fired exactly as programmed. Their targeting systems had functioned perfectly, and their energy beams had traveled in absolutely straight lines. But somehow, impossibly, the station had simply not been where the beams arrived, despite appearing to occupy that exact position both before and after the weapons fired. "Sub-Commander," he said quietly, "explain to me how a stationary target can avoid weapons fire without moving." Velnara's scales had paled to a sickly white color. I cannot, sir. According to our sensors, their station never changed position. According to our weapons systems, we fired accurately. According to the laws of physics, those beams should have struck their target. According to the laws of physics, as you understand them, Dr. Chun corrected gently. But consciousness is also part of physics, Commander. You just haven't learned to calculate its influence yet. She stood again, and this time there was something different in her posture. The resignation ZYX had initially perceived was gone, replaced by something that made his survival instincts scream warnings. "Now, then," Dr. Chun said, her voice carrying an undertone that seemed to resonate in the quantum foam of space itself. "Shall we discuss the terms of your surrender?" ZYX-Thin's mandibles clicked rapidly in what any Zephyrian would recognize as extreme agitation. The human's words hung in the air like a challenge to the natural order itself. In his 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered a species that could turn the conversation toward their own surrender after demonstrating impossible defensive capabilities. "You cannot seriously expect us to surrender to a single research station," he said, though his voice lacked its previous confidence. "We are the Zephyrian Third Fleet. We have conquered worlds. And yet," Dr. Chen replied, her image on the screen seeming to shimmer slightly as if viewed through water, "here you are, 12 ships strong, unable to hit a stationary target." She gestured casually, and behind her, the quantum research equipment pulsed with energies that made the bridge's instruments emit soft warning chimes. "Tell me, Commander, how many worlds did those previous species have?" The question caught him off guard. "What does that matter? Humor me." The Rigelians controlled 6 systems. The Centauri Confederation held 14. The Drachmarie Empire. He paused, realizing where this was leading. The Drachmarie controlled 31 systems. And in each case, you were attacking the heart of their civilization, their core worlds, their primary populations. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. When you threaten a species' homeworld, they fight to defend what they have. When you threaten humanity, she smiled again, and the expression sent chills through every bridge officer present. You threaten everything we might become. She moved to a different console, and the view expanded to show more of the station's interior. What ZYX then saw there made his 4 eyes widen in shock. The quantum expanded space contained not just research laboratories, but what appeared to be an entire city. Humans of all ages moved through corridors that stretched far beyond what should have been possible, tending to hydroponic gardens, operating manufacturing facilities, and conducting research that bent space-time around them like clay. "This isn't just a research station," he breathed. "No," Dr. Chun confirmed. "This is humanity's first true seed ship. Self-sustaining, self-expanding, capable of creating new space from quantum vacuum when needed. We call it Project Genesis, and Echo 7 is just the first of 50 such stations we're building." The implications hit ZYX then like a physical blow. If humans could create expanding habitats from exotic matter and quantum fields, if they could manipulate probability itself through focused consciousness, then they weren't just another species to be conquered. They were a fundamentally different type of threat. "Velnara," he said quietly, "transmit our findings to Hegemony Command immediately." "Sir, that will take 14 hours via quantum entanglement communicator. Then begin transmission now." He turned back to the screen, where Dr. Chun waited patiently. What do you want? Want? She seemed genuinely surprised by the question. Commander, I don't think you understand the situation. We don't want anything from you. You came here to attack us, remember? Then, why are you negotiating instead of simply destroying us? Dr. Chan was quiet for a long moment, her expression growing more serious. Because, Commander ZYX Than, we've learned something important in our 3 years of research. Something that might matter to your species as well as ours. She manipulated her console, and the screen now showed what appeared to be a star map of the galaxy. But this wasn't any standard astronomical chart. Vast sections of space were highlighted in different colors, with streams of energy connecting distant points like a cosmic web. This is what consciousness looks like on a galactic scale, Dr. Chen explained. Every dot of light represents a sentient species, and the colored regions show the influence their combined consciousness has on local quantum fields. ZYX then studied the map intently. The Zephyrian hegemony's territory was shown in blue, a steadily expanding region that had grown significantly over the past millennium. But there were other colors as well, vast swaths of green, purple, and red that represented other galactic powers he'd never heard of. Impressive computer graphics, Velnara muttered, though she too was studying the display carefully. Not graphics, Dr. Chen corrected. Direct observation. When you learn to perceive quantum consciousness fields, you can actually see the influence that intelligent life has on the structure of space-time itself. She highlighted a section of the map that showed a massive red region expanding outward from the galactic core. This is what we call the Devourers. They've been systematically eliminating consciousness from the galaxy for the past 50,000 years, working their way outward from the center. The implications of what she was showing them began to sink in. If this data was accurate, then the hegemony's expansion into what they believed was empty space was actually bringing them closer to something far more dangerous than any species they'd previously encountered. According to our calculations, Dr. Chun continued, the Devourers will reach the outer rim territories in approximately 2,000 years. When they do, every sentient species in this region of the galaxy will face extinction. Not conquest, not absorption, not subjugation. Complete elimination of consciousness itself. ZYX then felt his secondary hearts begin to beat faster. Why are you telling us this? Because consciousness is stronger when it works together, Commander. When the Rigelians surrendered to you, their quantum influence simply merged with yours. When you absorbed the Centauri Confederation, their consciousness became part of the hegemony's collective field. Dr. Chun manipulated the display again, and now it showed probability projections stretching into the future. But when you destroy a species entirely, when you eliminate their consciousness rather than absorbing it, you weaken the galaxy's total defensive capability against the Devourers. The projections were sobering. If current expansion patterns continued, the various galactic powers would be too scattered and too busy fighting each other to mount any effective defense when the Devourers arrived. But if they could somehow coordinate their efforts, you're proposing an alliance, ZYX then said slowly. I'm proposing survival, Dr. Chen replied. Humanity has advantages your species lacks. Our quantum consciousness research, our ability to manipulate probability fields, our talent for impossible solutions to impossible problems. The hegemony has advantages we lack. Established infrastructure, military experience, territorial control across multiple systems. She paused, letting the implications settle in his mind. Separately, we might both survive the next 2 millennia. Together, we might actually have a chance to stop the Devourers entirely. Velnara leaned closer to ZYX Than's command chair. Sir, this could be an elaborate deception. Humans are known for their capacity to lie. Yes, Dr. Chen said, apparently able to hear the whispered comment. We are excellent liars when necessary. But we're even better at survival, Subcommander. And everything I've shown you can be verified independently. She gestured toward the quantum research equipment behind her. And suddenly, the device began to emit a low harmonic tone that somehow reached through space to resonate in the hulls of the Zephyrian ships. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, but underneath it was something else, a sense of vast distances and infinite possibilities. That resonance you're hearing is consciousness itself, Commander. The combined quantum field generated by every thinking being in this part of the galaxy. When you learn to listen to it properly, you can hear the approaching silence where the devourers have been. She was right. Underneath the harmonious tones of living minds, ZYX then could perceive something that might have been emptiness, or might have been hunger. A vast quiet that seemed to be moving slowly, but inexorably toward them. "How do we know we can trust you?" he asked. "You don't," Dr. Chen admitted freely. "Trust is earned over time through shared experience and mutual benefit. What you can know is that humanity needs allies as much as the hegemony does, and that our survival interests are currently aligned." She moved to yet another console, and now the display showed technical specifications that made Velnara hiss in surprise. "Quantum consciousness amplifier technology," Dr. Chen explained. "The theoretical framework for building devices that can enhance the natural probability manipulation abilities of any sentient species. We've designed the basic systems for Zephyrian neural structures as well as human ones." The specifications were genuine. ZYX then could see that immediately. The mathematical principles were sound, the engineering solutions elegant, and the potential applications staggering. If the hegemony's military forces could be equipped with consciousness amplifiers, their tactical advantage over any opponents would be overwhelming. "You would share this technology?" "In exchange for three things, Dr. Chen replied. "First, a formal cessation of hostilities between humanity and the hegemony. Second, joint research cooperation to develop better defenses against the devourers. And third," she paused, her expression becoming more serious, "help evacuating Earth." "Evacuating Earth," ZYX then repeated. "Why would you abandon your homeworld?" "Because it's a trap," Dr. Chun said simply. "The devourers don't just destroy consciousness, Commander. They use it. Every sentient being they encounter becomes part of their collective field, adding to their power and knowledge. Earth contains 7 billion human minds, all connected to our quantum consciousness network. If the devourers reach Earth before we can evacuate it," she didn't need to finish the thought. 7 billion amplified human consciousnesses, each one capable of manipulating probability fields, would make the devourers virtually unstoppable. "How long do we have?" ZYX then asked. "Our projections suggest we have between 1800 and 2200 years before they reach this region. Enough time to evacuate Earth's population to quantum-expanded seed ships like Echo 7, but only if we begin construction immediately." The scope of what she was proposing was staggering. Building 50 seed ships capable of housing billions of people while simultaneously developing new defensive technologies and coordinating with potentially hostile alien species. It was the kind of impossible task that would require everything both species could contribute. "There's one more thing you should know," Dr. Chun added quietly. "The quantum consciousness resonance effect that protects this station, it scales exponentially with the number of participants and the severity of the threat. A single seed ship with 200,000 humans facing extinction could probably alter reality enough to destroy an entire fleet." She let that sink in for a moment. But 50 seed ships, each carrying 10 million humans, all focused on preventing the devourers from reaching their destination? That kind of concentrated consciousness could potentially rewrite the quantum structure of space-time itself. ZYX then stared at the human woman on his screen, realizing that everything he thought he knew about galactic politics had just become obsolete. Humanity wasn't just another species to be conquered or allied with. They were potentially the key to survival itself. "I will need to consult with Hegemony Command," he said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need, Commander." Dr. Chen smiled, and for the first time, it seemed genuinely warm. "We'll be here when you're ready to talk." After all, we have nowhere else to go. As the transmission ended, ZYX then found himself staring at the research station with entirely new eyes. What had seemed like a simple target for conquest had revealed itself to be something unprecedented, a species that could turn desperation into power and survival instinct into reality-altering force. The question now was whether the hegemony would be wise enough to recognize the opportunity, or whether they would continue their expansion until they drew the attention of something far worse than humanity. Either way, ZYX then suspected that the galaxy was about to become a very different place. 6 months later, Commander ZYX then stood in the quantum-expanded conference chamber aboard Research Station Echo 7, watching human and Zephyrian engineers work side by side on projects that would have been impossible for either species to complete alone. The sight still felt surreal, even after all this time. The Hegemony Command's response to his initial report had been predictably skeptical. 3 full investigative committees, 2 independent verification teams, and 1 attempted military assault had all confirmed the same impossible truth. Humanity could manipulate probability through concentrated consciousness, and they were willing to share the technology with former enemies. The attempted assault had been particularly educational. The Hegemony's 4th Fleet had arrived with orders to capture Echo 7 by force, convinced that ZYX then had been somehow compromised or deceived. They had lasted exactly 17 minutes before their own weapons began malfunctioning. Their navigation systems started reporting positions that defied Euclidean geometry, and their flagship found itself accidentally jumping to a location 3 light-years away with no memory of how it had happened. Admiral Kethvar had returned to Hegemony space with a formal recommendation that humanity be immediately classified as a Probability Class Alpha threat, and that negotiations should proceed exactly as Dr. Chun had suggested. "Commander," Dr. Chen's voice broke through his musings. She approached across the chamber, moving with the easy confidence that ZYX then had learned to associate with humans who were working on problems they believed they could solve. "The evacuation timeline projections are ready for your review." She handed him a datapad containing calculations that represented the largest logistical undertaking in recorded galactic history. Evacuating 7 billion humans from Earth to 50 quantum-expanded seed ships, while simultaneously building a defense network capable of stopping entities that had been destroying civilizations for 50,000 years. 2,137 years, ZYX then read aloud. "Assuming optimal resource allocation and no major setbacks." "Conservative estimate," Dr. Chen replied. "We've learned not to be overly optimistic when dealing with impossible deadlines. Though I should mention that our quantum consciousness research has been accelerating faster than we initially predicted." She gestured toward a section of the chamber where human and Zephyrian scientists were clustered around a device that seemed to fold space into geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The machine hummed with energy that made OYX scales tingle, and occasionally it would emit soft chimes that sounded almost like music. "Dr. Velnara's team made a breakthrough last week," Dr. Chen continued. "It turns out that Zephyrian neural structures can generate quantum consciousness resonance at frequencies that complement human patterns perfectly. When we combine our abilities..." She trailed off as the device, suddenly, blazed with light that seemed to come from somewhere other than normal space. When the radiance faded, a section of empty air near the machine now contained what appeared to be a perfect cube of crystallized spacetime. "Matter creation from quantum vacuum," Dr. Chun said matter-of-factly. "We're literally thinking materials into existence. At this rate, we might be able to complete the seed ship construction centuries ahead of schedule." ZYX then studied the impossible cube, which seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "How much faster?" "Well, if we can scale this up to industrial levels." Dr. Chin pulled out another datapad and began making rapid calculations. 800 years, possibly less. Of course, that assumes we can convince the other galactic powers to join the evacuation effort. Other powers? Oh yes, we've been in communication with 17 different species across the galaxy. Turns out consciousness-based quantum communication works at faster than light speeds. And once you know how to listen for it, you can reach anyone who's willing to participate in the network. She manipulated the pad's display, showing a real-time map of galactic consciousness that made ZYX-Then's previous understanding of interstellar politics look laughably primitive. Streams of quantum energy connected dozens of civilizations in an intricate web of communication and cooperation. The Andromedans have already agreed to help with resource gathering. The Vegan Confederacy is contributing their expertise in megascale engineering. The Sirius Collective is sharing their knowledge of exotic matter manipulation. Dr. Chen's smile grew wider. Apparently, when you offer people a chance to survive the end of galactic civilization, they become remarkably cooperative. And the Devourers? Dr. Chen's expression grew more serious. Still coming. Still eliminating consciousness from the galactic core. But we've learned more about them in the past 6 months than anyone has in 50,000 years. She led him to another section of the chamber where a massive holographic display showed the galaxy from a consciousness perspective. The red zone of the Devourers had grown noticeably larger since their first meeting, but now there were other colors as well. Streams of green, blue, and gold that represented the growing Alliance network. They're not evil, Commander. They're not malicious or cruel or even particularly aggressive. They're just empty. They exist in a state of quantum consciousness that's perfectly stable, but completely devoid of creativity, growth, or change. When they encounter other forms of consciousness, they don't destroy it out of hatred. They simply can't comprehend why anyone would want to exist in such an unstable, chaotic state. She highlighted a section of the display that showed the interface between the red zone and normal space. To them, consciousness, as we understand, it is a kind of quantum infection that needs to be cured. They genuinely believe they're helping when they convert sentient species to their stable state. Can they be reasoned with? We've tried. Dr. Martinez established quantum communication contact 3 months ago. Dr. Chen's expression grew distant. The conversation lasted exactly 47 seconds before Dr. Martinez had to be placed in quantum isolation to prevent his consciousness from being converted. Apparently, direct contact with their collective field is persuasive. ZYX then felt his secondary heart skip a beat. What did they say? They offered to help us achieve perfect stability. No more fear, no more uncertainty, no more desperate struggles against impossible odds. Just eternal, peaceful existence in a state of quantum equilibrium. Dr. Chen shook her head. Dr. Martinez said it was the most seductive offer he'd ever heard. Part of him still wants to accept it. The implications were chilling. If the Devourers could convert individuals through direct communication, then any species that encountered them would face not just physical destruction, but psychological warfare unlike anything previously imagined. However, Dr. Chun continued, her tone brightening. We've also discovered that quantum consciousness resonance provides natural immunity to their conversion field. The more chaotic and unstable your mental state, the harder it is for them to impose their stability pattern on you. You're suggesting that humanity's talent for desperate solutions makes us naturally resistant to their influence? Exactly. And not just humans. Any species that can generate quantum consciousness resonance through stress, fear, determination, or similar emotional states. She gestured toward the Zephyrian scientists working nearby. Your people's natural aggression and territorial instincts create excellent protection against devourer conversion, especially when channeled through our amplification technology. ZYX then watched Velnara explain some complex quantum calculation to a human researcher. They're two species working together with an efficiency that would have been unimaginable 6 months ago. What happens when we actually encounter them? That depends on how prepared we are. Dr. Chen led him to the chamber's central display, which now showed a 3-dimensional projection of the completed defense network. Hundreds of seed ships connected by quantum consciousness fields, mobile research stations capable of creating matter from vacuum energy, and weapon systems that could manipulate probability itself. If we can complete the evacuation and establish the network before they reach the outer rim, we'll have a chance to do something no species has ever accomplished before. Her eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that ZYX then had learned to associate with humans contemplating impossible challenges. We're going to cure them. Cure them. Think about it, Commander. They exist in a state of perfect quantum stability, but stability without growth is just another form of death. They've been eliminating consciousness from a galaxy for 50,000 years, but they haven't actually gained anything from it. No new knowledge, no expanded capabilities, no evolution or development. She manipulated the display to show theoretical projections of the Devourer collective consciousness. They're trapped in a stable quantum state that prevents them from changing or learning. But quantum consciousness resonance isn't just about manipulating probability. It's about creating new possibilities where none existed before. The projection shifted to show what appeared to be streams of chaotic energy, introducing controlled instability into the Devourer's perfect order. Not destroying their consciousness, but adding the possibility of growth and change. You want to make them unstable again? I want to give them the option to become unstable again, Dr. Chen corrected. The choice to grow, to change, to experience uncertainty and possibility. Some of them might choose to remain in their current state, and that's fine. But others might remember what it was like to dream of impossible things. ZYX then stared at the projection, trying to comprehend the scope of what she was proposing. You're talking about changing the fundamental nature of entities that have been operating unchanged for 50 millennia. Yes, Dr. Chen replied simply. It's impossible, unprecedented, and completely insane by any rational standard. Her smile returned, and ZYX then recognized the expression that had initially made his survival instinct scream warnings. In other words, it's exactly the kind of problem humans were designed to solve. Across the chamber, the quantum matter creation device chimed again, and another cube of crystallized space-time popped into existence. The human and Zephyrian scientists cheered together, their combined consciousness briefly creating a resonance field that made the entire station hum with possibilities. The preliminary timeline shows first contact with the Devourer advanced scouts in approximately 800 years, Dr. Chen continued. By then, we should have the evacuation completed, the defense network established, and the consciousness conversion technology ready for deployment. And if it doesn't work, then we'll improvise something else, Dr. Chen said with absolute confidence. That's what humans do, Commander. We keep trying impossible solutions until one of them works. She paused, studying his expression. Though I should mention that our probability calculations suggest a 93% chance of success, assuming continued cooperation between all Alliance members. 93%. ZYX then repeated. How can you calculate odds for something that's never been attempted before? Because consciousness creates its own probability matrices, Commander. When enough sentient beings believe something is possible and work together to achieve it, the universe tends to accommodate their expectations. Dr. Chun gestured toward the massive display showing the growing Alliance network. Right now, we have representatives from 43 different species all believing that they can save the galaxy from an unstoppable threat. Their combined consciousness is literally rewriting the quantum probability fields to make success more likely. As if to demonstrate her point, the matter creation device suddenly produced not just another cube, but an entire complex geometric structure that seemed to exist in at least 7 dimensions simultaneously. The human and Zephyrian scientists gathered around it with expressions of awe and excitement. Faith-based quantum engineering, DR. Chen observed with satisfaction. The universe is remarkably cooperative when you believe strongly enough in impossible things. ZYX then felt a strange sensation that it took him several moments to identify. For the first time in his 3 centuries of existence, he was experiencing something that his species had no word for. The closest translation might have been hope, but it was more than that. It was the absolute certainty that despite impossible odds and unprecedented challenges, everything was going to work out exactly as it should. Dr. Chun, he said slowly, I believe my people are beginning to understand why humans are so dangerous. Oh, we're not dangerous, Commander, she replied, her smile becoming genuinely warm. We're just very, very stubborn. When the universe tells us something is impossible, we take it as a suggestion rather than a limitation. She gestured toward the chamber's viewing ports, where the other Alliance ships could be seen working together on projects that defied conventional understanding. Quantum consciousness fields linked dozens of species in collaborative efforts that were changing the fundamental nature of what was possible in the galaxy. Besides, Dr. Chen added, we're not alone anymore. When humans get stubborn about impossible things, apparently the universe sends us friends who are just as crazy as we are. ZYX then watched his own people working alongside beings they had intended to conquer just months earlier, all of them united by the shared certainty that they could accomplish something that had never been done before. For the first time since receiving his original orders to attack Echo 7, he found himself looking forward to the future. The Devourers were still coming. The galaxy still faced the prospect of total consciousness extinction. The evacuation timelines were still impossibly ambitious, and the conversion technology was still purely theoretical. But somehow, impossibly, ZYX then found himself believing that it was all going to work out fine. After all, he was beginning to think like a human.